The Crusades were a series of religious and military campaigns waged primarily between Christian Europe and Muslim-controlled regions of the Middle East, spanning from 1096 to 1291. These campaigns were instigated by the Christian desire to reclaim Jerusalem and the Holy Land from Muslim rule, though they were also motivated by a complex interplay of religious fervor, political intrigue, economic gain, and social pressures. Over the nearly 2 centuries of conflict, the Crusades would profoundly reshape the political, cultural, and religious landscape of Europe and the Middle East, leaving a legacy that continues to be studied and debated. The origins of the Crusades can be traced back to the growing power of the Seljuk Turks in the 11th century. By the late 11th century, the Seljuks had taken control of much of the Middle East, including Jerusalem, a city of immense religious significance to Christians, Muslims, and Jews. The Byzantine Empire, which had previously controlled much of this territory, was increasingly threatened by the Turkish advance. Emperor Alexios I Komnenos, facing the decline of Byzantine power, appealed to Pope Urban II for military aid. In 1095, Pope Urban II delivered a sermon at the Council of Clermont in France, calling on Christian knights and nobles to take up arms and reclaim Jerusalem from Muslim control. This call was imbued with religious significance, promising spiritual rewards for those who participated. The Pope framed the conflict as a holy war, a divinely sanctioned struggle between the forces of Christendom and Islam. This message resonated deeply with the feudal society of medieval Europe, where religious devotion and the warrior ethos were tightly intertwined. However, the motivations behind the Crusades were not purely religious. Political leaders saw an opportunity to extend their influence and gain new territories. For many knights and nobles, the Crusades offered the prospect of land, wealth, and social advancement. Additionally, the Church saw the Crusades as a means to consolidate its power and direct the violence of European nobility away from internal conflicts and toward a common external enemy. The First Crusade was the most successful of all the Crusades, achieving its primary objective of capturing Jerusalem. It began with a popular movement known as the People's Crusade, led by the charismatic preacher Peter the Hermit. However, this early wave of poorly organized and ill-equipped crusaders was easily defeated by Muslim forces in Asia Minor. The main crusading force, composed of well-armed knights and led by prominent European nobles, followed soon after. The First Crusade was marked by a series of brutal and bloody campaigns. The Crusaders captured several key cities, including Antioch in 1098, before finally reaching Jerusalem in 1099. The siege of Jerusalem culminated in a massacre of the city's Muslim and Jewish inhabitants, an event that would echo throughout history and fuel animosity between Christians and Muslims for centuries to come. The success of the First Crusade led to the establishment of several Crusader states in the Levant, including the Kingdom of Jerusalem, the Principality of Antioch, the County of Edessa, and the County of Tripoli. These states were Christian enclaves in a predominantly Muslim region, relying heavily on military support from Europe to maintain their existence. The success of the First Crusade was not replicated in subsequent campaigns. The Second Crusade 1147 to 1149 was launched in response to the fall of the County of Edessa to Muslim forces in 1144. Led by King Louis VII of France and Emperor Conrad III of Germany, the Second Crusade was a dismal failure, with the Crusaders suffering heavy losses and failing to achieve any significant victories. The Third Crusade 1189 to 1192 is perhaps the most famous of all the Crusades, largely due to the larger-than-life figures involved. It was launched in response to the capture of Jerusalem by the Muslim leader Saladin in 1187. The crusade was led by 3 of the most powerful rulers of Europe: King Richard I of England, known as Richard the Lionheart, King Philip II of France, and Emperor Frederick I Barbarossa of the Holy Roman Empire. Despite achieving some military successes, including the capture of the city of Acre, the Crusaders were unable to recapture Jerusalem. Richard the Lionheart and Saladin eventually negotiated a truce, allowing Christian pilgrims access to Jerusalem, but leaving the city under Muslim control. The Fourth Crusade 1202 to 1204 marked a turning point in the history of the Crusades. Originally intended to strike at Muslim-held Egypt as a precursor to reclaiming Jerusalem, the crusade was diverted to Constantinople, the capital of the Byzantine Empire. In 1204, the Crusaders sacked Constantinople, leading to the establishment of the Latin Empire and a deepening rift between the Roman Catholic and Eastern Orthodox churches. The Fourth Crusade demonstrated the increasingly complex and often contradictory motivations behind the Crusades, where religious objectives were frequently overshadowed by political and economic interests. The 5th, 6th, and 7th Crusades, 1217 to 1250, were similarly marked by failure and disillusionment. These campaigns saw repeated attempts to capture Egypt, which was seen as the key to controlling the Holy Land. However, each of these efforts ended in disaster, with the Crusaders suffering heavy losses and achieving little in terms of strategic gains. The final major crusading effort was the 8th Crusade 1270, led by King Louis IX of France. The campaign ended in failure with Louis's death in Tunis. By the end of the 13th century, the Crusader states in the Levant had been almost entirely overrun by Muslim forces. The fall of Acre in 1291 marked the end of the Crusader presence in the Holy Land and the conclusion of the Crusades as a major historical movement. The Crusades had a profound impact on both Europe and the Middle East, shaping the course of history in numerous ways. In Europe, the Crusades contributed to the centralization of political power as kings and emperors took on leadership roles in organizing and financing the campaigns. The movement also facilitated the rise of a more unified Christian identity in Europe, as the struggle against Islam was framed as a collective effort of Christendom. Economically, the Crusades opened up new trade routes and stimulated commerce between Europe and the Middle East. The flow of goods, ideas, and technologies between the two regions helped to lay the groundwork for the Renaissance. The Crusades also had a significant cultural impact, exposing Europeans to new ideas, art, and science from the Islamic world. However, the Crusades also left a legacy of violence, intolerance, and religious hatred. The brutal massacres of Muslims, Jews, and Eastern Christians during the Crusades fueled deep-seated animosities that would persist for centuries. The sacking of Constantinople in 1204 deepened the schism between the Roman Catholic and Eastern Orthodox churches, a division that remains to this day. In the Middle East, the Crusades are often remembered as a time of foreign invasion and occupation. The Muslim world eventually emerged victorious, but the memory of the Crusades has continued to shape perceptions of the West in the region. The Crusades are frequently invoked in modern political and religious discourse, often as a symbol of Western aggression against the Islamic world. The Crusades were a complex and multifaceted series of events that left an indelible mark on the history of both Europe and the Middle East. While they began as a religiously motivated effort to reclaim the Holy Land, they quickly became entangled with political, economic, and social factors. The legacy of the Crusades is a mixed one, characterized by both the expansion of European influence and the deepening of religious and cultural divides. Understanding the Crusades requires an appreciation of the diverse motivations and consequences that shaped this pivotal period in history.